It was supposed to be a routine Pacific Island assault, but the small island of Peleliu became one of the bloodiest, most brutal battles in U.S. Marine Corps history. Before we begin, subscribe to witness real American war stories, battlefield heroics, and the untold cost of victory. Now, let's step into the burning coral cliffs of Peleliu, 1944. The strategic gamble in 1944. The Pacific War had reached a critical phase. The U.S. forces had secured Guadalcanal, captured the Marshall Islands, and were now moving toward the Philippines. But to establish air superiority, the Americans needed airfields closer to the Japanese home islands. One small coral island, Peleliu, part of the Palau chain, became the focus. At just 7 square miles, the island seemed insignificant on a map.
Estimated 3 to 4 days.
But Japanese
Easy.
General Sadao Inoue had turned it into a fortress. Thousands of Japanese soldiers were entrenched in caves, ridges, and coral cliffs, armed with artillery, machine guns, and mortars. U.S. intelligence underestimated both the terrain and the enemy's resolve. They assumed the island could be taken in a matter of days. What awaited the Marines would be an endurance test unlike any they had ever faced. Days of relentless artillery, sniper fire, and close-quarter combat that pushed men to the edge of physical and mental endurance. Peleliu was small, but it became a crucible that would test the limits of courage. Arrival at the island on September 15, 1944. The 1st Marine Division approached Peleliu under the cover of naval bombardment. Battleships and cruisers pounded the beaches, sending fire and smoke across the coral reefs. Marine amphibious units advanced toward the shore, anticipating a wave of Japanese defenses typical of prior campaigns. But the first impression was deceiving. Instead of open beaches, Marines faced sheer cliffs, jagged coral formations, and hidden machine gun nests. Japanese defenders had learned from past battles. Frontal assaults were slaughter traps. Every possible choke point, every natural barrier was fortified. U.S. Marines waded through chest-high water and razor-sharp coral, dodging artillery shells and sniper fire, only to find that the island's defenses were far more intricate and deadly than anticipated. This was no ordinary battle. It was a living nightmare designed to kill as many attackers as possible. As Marines pushed inland, they encountered the famous Brogol ridges, a network of caves carved deep into coral cliffs. These caves were interconnected, allowing Japanese troops to move undetected and strike from multiple angles. The Americans had never seen anything like it. Mortar fire rained down, machine guns cut swaths through advancing lines, and every hill seemed alive with deadly eyes. Casualties mounted quickly. Medics struggled to keep up, carrying wounded over treacherous terrain while enemy fire ripped through the open. The U.S. Navy's heavy bombardment had little effect on the cave networks. Each bunker and slit trench was carefully camouflaged, some dug decades earlier during Japanese occupation. Marines quickly realized that capturing Peleliu would require clearing every inch of terrain by hand, cave by cave, ridge by ridge. The psychological toll was immense. Days of constant fire, screams, explosions, and mud made sleep almost impossible. The Marines weren't just fighting a human enemy. They were fighting the island itself. In these extreme conditions, individual acts of heroism became legendary. One such Marine, Corporal Charles Jackson, single-handedly cleared a machine gun nest that had pinned down his company. Crawling through waist-deep mud under fire, he placed grenades into the bunker, silencing it. Stories like these multiplied. Marines improvised flamethrowers and used satchel charges to destroy enemy fortifications. Every advance came at a cost. Squads lost half their men in mere hours. Yet the determination never faltered. The Japanese defenders, understanding their own isolation, fought with a fanaticism that shocked even the most battle-hardened U.S. veterans. They preferred death to surrender, forcing the Marines to engage in brutal close-quarters combat. By the end of the first week, hundreds of American soldiers lay dead, but the island was only a fraction cleared. This was the darkest reality of Peleliu. Every gain cost human lives at a staggering rate. The terrain of Peleliu also created a logistical nightmare. Supplies, ammunition, and food had to be transported over coral and rocks under constant enemy observation. Water was scarce, and heat exhaustion added to the burden. Many Marines suffered from tropical diseases, sunburn, and heat stroke while continuing to fight. Evacuating the wounded became a massive challenge. Stretchers had to be carried by hand over jagged coral paths. Helicopters were not yet widely used for casualty evacuation in 1944. and the Navy couldn't always provide close support due to the island's geography. Commanders had to constantly adapt, sending reinforcements in waves while accounting for extreme attrition. This logistical nightmare magnified the horrors of combat. The U.S. command learned painfully that even a small island could become a war that demanded months of effort to subdue. The first turning point came when Marines finally began using flamethrowers and demolitions to neutralize the interconnected caves. It became clear that conventional tactics, frontal assaults and naval bombardments, were insufficient. Small specialized teams moved forward under cover, clearing bunkers systematically. Yet the Japanese fought to the last man in most positions. The death toll continued to rise on both sides. Each captured cave revealed more enemy positions, more tunnels, and more obstacles. The battle slowed to a crawl. Commanders often referred to the island as a bloody grinding machine, where every ridge demanded sacrifices measured in human life. The Pacific theater had seen many brutal fights, but Peleliu was becoming a defining example of combat intensity and strategic stubbornness. By October 1944, after more than a month of constant fighting, the U.S. Marines had finally taken control of the main ridges. But the cost was staggering. Of the 11,000 Marines involved in the initial assault, more than 3,000 were killed and over 8,000 wounded. Japanese losses were almost total, but their purpose was fulfilled. They inflicted maximum casualties and delayed the American advance. The island, tiny as it was, had absorbed an entire division's attention, disrupted supply lines, and forced strategic re-evaluation for subsequent campaigns. Peleliu's battle became a case study for military academies worldwide. It showed that well-prepared fortifications, even on small islands, could inflict catastrophic losses against superior forces. Yet it also showcased the resilience, determination, and sheer willpower of the U.S. Marines under extreme pressure. The human element of Peleliu stands out as much as the strategy. Letters from Marines describe days where no sleep was possible, where the ground was soaked in rain, sweat, and blood. Soldiers wrote of comrades falling to sniper fire while attempting to aid the wounded. Stories of bravery, like Marine Corporal Thomas Smith shielding fellow soldiers from grenades, became legendary. The horror was omnipresent. Tropical diseases, dehydration, lack of proper rations, and the psychological toll of seeing friends die around every corner. Commanders reported that morale surprisingly remained high, fueled by camaraderie and the belief that every foot of the island mattered for the larger Pacific campaign. Peleliu wasn't just a battle. It was a test of endurance, humanity, and sacrifice on a scale rarely seen. When the last Japanese soldier was finally captured or killed in November 1944, the island was secured. The Marines had achieved victory, but at an enormous human cost. Strategic lessons were drawn from the fight. Never underestimate terrain, never assume that small islands are easy to capture, and prepare for the enemy's determination to inflict maximum casualties. Peleliu forced U.S. commanders to rethink how they would approach Iwo Jima and Okinawa in the coming years.
You're home now, you're safe.
The battle also left a permanent mark on those who survived. Many Marines suffered from what would later be called PTSD, haunted by the screams, blood, and relentless heat of the Coral Island. Historians often cite Peleliu as the forgotten Battle of WWII, overshadowed by the larger campaigns in the Philippines and Leyte Gulf. But for the soldiers who fought there, it was unforgettable. Today, Peleliu stands as a solemn monument to the courage of U.S. Marines and the horrors of war. Sunken bunkers, remnants of artillery, and collapsed caves still litter the island. Memorials honor those who fell. Military academies teach its lessons. Bravery alone does not guarantee success. Planning and logistics are paramount, and no terrain is too small to become a crucible of human endurance. Peleliu reminds the world that heroism often comes at an immense price, and that strategy and preparation can sometimes overcome sheer fanaticism. The battle exemplifies the relentless spirit of American soldiers in WWII, a story of sacrifice, ingenuity, and determination in the face of impossible odds.